The Nurburgring in Germany, the greatest historic racing car event in the world, and to it come the Americans to try their hand, as Alex Quattlebaum explains.
It's the Sports Car Vintage Racing Association, and we came over to compete to show the Europeans that we know a little bit about racing, and we've done very well with it so far.
The Americans certainly do know more than a little bit about vintage racing. They have a superb selection of cars over there, and those that we saw in Europe were beautifully turned out. Their own race scene is an exciting one that runs season-long. And some 30 years after its original construction, it was the first chance for Europeans to see the Devin SS. A big sports car built to compete against the Ferraris, the Maseratis, the Lister Jaguars of the day. Alex Quattlebaum to drive this car himself. The Chevrolet Corvette, of course, was first seen in the mid-50s. This is one of the original models. The Americans, needless to say, had brought one of these too. The big V8 Chevrolet engine, which of course went on in modified form to power other sorts of car, was seen to advantage for the first time when the Americans produced a car to compete with the Europeans. After the advent of the E-Type Jaguar, they had to think of something different. They did. This was the 1964 Corvette. Independent rear end, a much sleeker body style, but for all the world a combination of the best of America and the best of Europe. By no manner of means could this be discounted as a fine GT car. It competed very successfully in its own country in its heyday and went on to do so in Europe as well. In 1958, British driver Chris Lawrence modified the Morgan Plus 4 and its Triumph TR2/3 engine into an effective sports racing car. This modification was an interesting one insofar as it developed a car which had been seen primarily in unchanged form since the early 1930s with a variety of engines. As the SVRA personnel, Alex Quattlebaum Jr. there, discuss how they're going to handle their racing, Harry Gaunt is about to climb into his example. Immaculately turned out, as were all the American cars in Germany. It's ironic that Chris Lawrence, the man who did so much for Morgans, is now domiciled in the United States of America, where he's seen from time to time competing in SVRA meetings. The Americans treated this as a working holiday, with two events to take in, both at the Nurburgring and at Zolder, which we shall be looking at later in the program. It was, however, a task force sent out to try the water, to see whether or not it was possible for the SVRA to come and compete in Europe on a larger scale in 1990 and into the next decade. One car that was essential was the Scarab, if you were going to fight against the likes of Ferraris and what have you. And here, Donna Roscoe, who'd made a separate visit to Europe, taking in many more races, was a competitor. Alex Quattlebaum, too, in this race, talking here to his son. A mixture of cars in this particular event, including single-seaters. The SVRA had been allowed to qualify two of their entries in this event that had missed official practice. And so, as Harry Gaunt's Morgan takes its place on the grid, he's joined at the back of it by the two chevrons. The first of them, number 75, is Richard Lepler's car, while the second is the much later example, running as number 72 in another of the races, as we've explained, belonging to Michael Amalfitano. Lepler in position, joined by the second car. And both these competitors hoping that the short time allowing for preparation is going to give them a chance of taking part in the event proper. A close-up of Lepler to a close-up of Amalfitano. Meanwhile, midway down the grid is Alex Quattlebaum, determined to prove that the Devlin can hold its own with a lot of more exotic machinery. Away they go, with a Formula One Lotus 25 of 1964 pulling off. Into the lead, David Piper with a superbly turned out P2 365 Ferrari. Piper, ex-Grand Prix and sports car driver, who lost a leg during the making of the Steve McQueen film Le Mans, still driving in historic races very competitively indeed. The very first rear-engine sports Ferrari was the 250 LM. This is Hans Hugenholtz's superb example, his father, of course, the originator of the Zandvoort circuit. The Scarab, Lance Reventlo's design, driven so competitively by Donna Roscoe. Here is Alex Quattlebaum with the Devin. This car was created in the late 50s. There are loads of ifs in motorsport, but had it perhaps received the support from Chevrolet that Ford gave to the AC Cobra and later to the development of the GT40, who knows what Chevrolet might have achieved with this car? It may indeed have made the Corvette program unnecessary or developed it at a much quicker pace than before. It certainly looked right, and it certainly goes right. Now perhaps it's achieving something of its real potential in Alex Quattlebaum's hands. The Morgan of Harry Gaunt, superbly turned out and going beautifully here. A 30s body style with a 50s engine, and the suspension on those cars barely changed from the day that they were first designed by Charles Morgan, whose grandson now runs the company. In the bright days of 2-litre sports car racing, Chevron was the car to have, and Brian Redmond regularly runs in SVRA events with a car of that type. Piper here with the Scarab closing in. Lance Reventlo's attempt to build an American sports car and Grand Prix car that could compete with the Europeans was sadly to fall by the wayside, but not before an enormous number of races had been won by Reventlow and by Chuck Day. Piper with the Ferrari, and behind him a Formula One car of the 60s. David Piper has a superb stable of Ferraris. He brought many of them with him to the Nurburgring and nominated others to drive them. Here is an English driver going motor racing as in days of yore. The flag out and Piper wins his race. Having acquitted themselves superbly on the first day here and in their first race, the Americans set about to prepare their cars for the full program at Nurburgring. Michael Amalfitano's Chevron being pushed back into the paddock. The standard of presentation of the American cars had become a talking point in the paddock. Vintage or historic racing in the United States has attracted a vast number of competitors. These, of course, were the early cars on which suspension was really adjustable. 2-litre sports car racing was an immensely popular formula in Europe in the late 60s and into the 70s, with a European championship that attracted Grand Prix drivers like Bonnier and Redmond and Rainer Wiesel against the likes of Britain's John Burton, Jean-Louis Lafosse, Lafitte and others from European countries. From the later Corvette to the original car. This had the disadvantage of having, of course, a 3-speed gearbox. By now, Zora Arcus Duntov had not yet worked his magic on the American car as a racing automobile. Shelby had done his, however, on the Ford Mustang, making it into the Shelby Mustang. Away go the GT cars over there. Ferraris, XK120s, and of course, more than a few AC Cobras. The Cobra, the creation of Carroll Shelby, lifting the Ford engine into the AC chassis, came across to Europe and won all before it in the early 60s. It was the forerunner of the GT40. In both 4.7 and 7-litre form, a formidable car. More than capable of dealing with the 250 GT Ferrari, if not always the GTO. Back home, the Corvette could do the same. This is Richard Taylor's example. 1964 car in immaculate trim. E-types and Ferraris, Corvettes, Mustangs and Triumphs. Robert Welch's earlier 1959 car. And back again to the later 64 example. These cars gave a good account of themselves against the opposition. Opposition which consisted of cars like the 250 GT Ferrari, the E-Type Jaguar. The Nurburgring has changed vastly since its original design in 1929. Now it's a broad, wide circuit with plenty of runoff area, ideally suited to historic car racing. The AVD are determined to build up the facilities here in the hope of getting the Grand Prix back one day to the famous Eiffel circuit. Cobra in charge. A superbly turned out example and going well. Dr. Ralph Berson comes through to take the checkered flag. While both the Corvettes acquit themselves well. 208 Richard Taylor and 184 Robert Welcher. For any serious student of motor racing, the next race was a feast. Here were some of the superb cars of the 50s, the D-Type Jaguars, the 300S, Maserati, Aston Martin, C-Type Jaguars, Porsches, and indeed cars like TKF9, the D-Type on which Jim Clark cut his teeth. From America came a Porsche to do battle with them. This was David Kopp's car, as they get away from the start. A Veritas there, nestling in and among the D-types. D-type versus 300S Maserati and DB3S Aston Martin, an ex-works car, with Kopp's Porsche coming up through the field rapidly. By the final stages of the race, it was Jaguar versus Porsche at the Nurburgring. The small German sports cars, more than capable of holding their own on the twists and turns of circuits that were like the ring, were obviously outclassed at Le Mans, other than from classification point of view, in the up to 1600 or 2-litre class. But in a race like this, the gap has narrowed. The D-Type, originally built in '54, is being caught by the Porsche. And in a daring move here, on the inside, through comes Kopp to take the lead. A combination of American driving and German technology, seeing off the Coventry car. Into his last lap, and Kopp very much in charge. Extending his lead all the time, touching the curb there. Kopp in the lead then, and we come up for an American win here at the Nurburgring. The flag falls, and we talk to the victorious driver about a famous victory here.
I've had 2 class wins, second and 1, and then an overall on the 100-miler, which was the Le Mans Start Classic race. And I owe that to my mechanics for proper preparation and helping me. They're the ones that did it.
You've enjoyed this meeting, presumably?
Oh, I love it. It's the best meeting I've ever been to. I've been to Monterey, and I've been to many SVRA events, which are always great. But this has got to be the high point of the year in any place in the world. I imagine they have over 100,000 spectators, and we had, I think, in excess of 600 cars here. And the most they ever have any place in the States is 300. And this is just marvelous. The cars are the highest caliber, the drivers are great, and they're friendly, and the promoters are so very nice. I can't say enough of the great facilities and nice people I've met here.
Arthur Haas's Corvette going well in the GT 1962-65 race, and the GTO Ferrari there going even better in the hands of Fabrizio Violato. Cobras versus E-types Ferraris and Corvettes. Taking to the dust there, the 250 GT Ferrari of Andre Bailey. The 250, of course, the predecessor to the GTO. And here Taylor going well with his 1964 Corvette as another car spins off. Up on the inside there of an E-Type, and followed by René van der Velden's Racing Team Holland 250 GT Ferrari. Taylor getting on with the job, pouring on the power of the big V8 Chevrolet engine. He's in the midst of this pack of car, Welsh's earlier car further back. A total difference in lines between the earlier and the later Corvette. But here, staying ahead of one E-Type and closely following another one. Really having a fair crack at this one, Robert Welscher. A spin coming up for a famous E-Type Jaguar. This is Cut 7, the famous ex-Dick Prothero car. The fixed-head coupe that Prothero drove to many victories. But the man in charge of this race, once again, Dr. Ralph Versen. The Cobra there, holding off another Corvette behind. Rapidly up through the field is also moving another E-Type, Hans-Joachim Weber. While Bert Hoffmann's Racing Team Holland car has a wicked spin here. The marshals go to work, but they've no need to worry as far as Versen is concerned, who comes through once again to take the checkered flag. A wave to this 100,000 crowd here at the Nurburgring. Meanwhile, in the paddock, work is still going on the recalcitrant chevrons. Electrics would appear to be the problem. But gradually the car is being persuaded to run more smoothly. They're preparing for the sports car race that caters for the Can-Am type cars. Among them is Martin Bolsover, the ex-British hill climb champion, and another ex-hill climb champion, David Franklin. Soames Langton in number 34, another Mark 6B McLaren. The white car number 17, Rolly Nix's Mark 8E, a later car. And 75, the Chevron there of Dick Lepler, believed to be the ex-Redmond Championship winning car, and Amal Gitano's car. Now hopefully recovered from its electrical problems. Away they go behind the Mercedes pace car for a warming up lap to get those huge tyres up to temperature for racing. And from the pace lap start, here's that first lap with forcing his way through here. Langton into second place alongside Bolsover. Nix too tries for conclusions there, but can't quite make it. Dust is raised, the B8 coupe chevrons behind there. And Franklin in the lead, Langton in second place. The big V8 side of racing, very popular of course in America and the Can-Am series, with many of the cars still resting over there, seen in the SVRA events, but a fair few of them seen in England. In the Thunder Sport series, these cars indeed have been winning races up to the present day for sports cars. Franklin showing a clean pair of heels currently to Langton, and there's a big spin there by number 56, happily missed by everybody else. That's the little chevron there that goes out. '75 Lepler with the Redmond Championship winning chevron. Still fluffing a little bit, but basically on song. The B8 there, not spinning out as has this B19. But still the effort being made by Langton to close the gap on the leader. And in spite of the fastest lap, he's left his effort just a little bit too late. It's David Franklin who comes through to take the checkered flag. Don Orozco on the grid before the start of the next race. In the background, the little X-Works Lotus 22 there. And this, the beautiful Ferrari coming up to take its position. That's Fabrizio Violati. The start on their away, and Piper there coming up and making a tremendous start, getting ahead there of the ex-Formula One Lotus on the row alongside him. Lister Jaguars in and among this tremendous field, and the Sopwith Sphinx, a very rare car indeed with an Allard base. Alex Quattlebaum with the Devin. And Quattlebaum determined to push the car to its utmost here and to go well. 250 LM and 275 LM Ferraris here just ahead of him. In behind, the odd sight of the single-seater Lotus, dwarfed by the Devin ahead. This is the pace of development between the late 50s and the early 60s. Quattlebaum again, demonstrating the road holding there and staying ahead of the rear-engine Ferrari. And Gaunt with the little Morgan, lying well up in his class. Donorosco with the Scarab, ahead here of a Lister, and really pushing that car hard. For many Europeans, it's the first opportunity to see the Lance Reventlow sports car, although the Grand Prix car was of course seen over here in both 60 and 61 in the Intercontinental races. And the last of the late breakers on the inside there, trying to see off a Lister. Orozco here gets all the way down on the grass there, raises the dust, but for all that still loses his position. So David Piper takes the flag again, and there's the discussion between Orozco and the Lister driver at the end of the race as they cross the line. The end of the Nurburgring, and we move to the prize giving. Harry Gaunt and his crew work on the starter motor of the Morgan prior to the start of the DAF European Historic Grand Prix at Zolder, the second of the two events taken in by the SVRA on their short tour of Europe. Gaunt has had the problem of a stud breaking off on the engine, and it appears to have dropped into the starter motor. Getting it out is another matter altogether. Eventually, the decision is taken that they've gone as far as they can. Everything's put back together again, but extra care is taken not to make too much use of that starter motor prior to the start of the second race of the day here in which the Morgan is taking part. Indeed, it's pushed up towards its starting position. Morgan, incidentally, ran one of these cars at Le Mans in Lawrence Tune 4. It was a successful entry and finished the 24-hour race. One of the very few unstreamlined cars, although Morgan did, of course, produce a streamlined car, the Plus 4 Plus, later. 250 GT Ferrari versus Austin Healey 3000. Dennis Welsh's car number 51 as we go back to Gaunt's Morgan further back on the grid, hoping that it will start. In and among, a glorious collection of Porsche 356s as away they go. And it's the Austin Healey that takes the lead. A tight battle round the tight corners here of Zolder. 51, Welsh leads off. Look, the stress on those tyres there, and the Ferrari tucked in behind. Gaunt making up for that somewhat indifferent start, working his way in and out of the Porsches there. A 3000 Austin Healey taking on a 250 GT Ferrari. A remarkable effort here. Lindsay Owen-Jones trying to hang on, but finding it quite impossible. Pouring on the power, the Austin Healey, now power slide there, still holds on to his lead. Gaunt with the Morgan, still making places. And the Healey, one headlight blazing, comes through to take the checkered flag. Healey first, Ferrari second, ahead of two Lotus Elites, another Austin Healey of Ferrari, with the Morgan in 7th place.
Well, David Koff won the overall, the 100-mile race, which is fantastic, against some really special cars. I came third in my class. We out of 9 cars, we took 6 trophies, which I think is credible. At least we didn't embarrass ourselves.
And now you've come to Zolder, and you're on the front row of the grid in your race.
Yeah, that's rather frightening, actually. I've got the Scarab sitting right behind me, and a very fast Lister on one side, and a Formula One Cooper. But we'll see what happens in the first turn. That's what counts.
Did you have a problem with the car at Nurburgring? Because it's going a lot better here.
Well, we found out when we got here, I'm such a fantastic test driver that I didn't realize that the shocks were broken. We had a completely collapsed shock. We've replaced that, and now it goes considerably easier.
So you're looking forward to a good race this afternoon?
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is such a fantastic venue. The people are great, and we've come here for the last 5 years, and this is the first time we brought all the Americans with us. But we love it here, and it's the Zolder and the Nurburgring both have just been terrific places for us.
Well, Don is not going as fast as I thought he would, because I've been timing him, and I thought he would be doing 158s, 156s, and he obviously is having brake problems, and Alex is just getting the car dialed in, so he's going to have a good go at it. But then that Formula One Cooper, he's in the same class they are, and if he doesn't brake, he'll take a win.
So the Porsches go to the line, including number 25, the smaller car of Frank Gallagher, and so does Alex Quattlebaum with the Devin. The man they have to beat is John Harper with the 2.5-litre 1960 Coventry Climax engine Formula One Cooper. Harper to the line with alongside it Quattlebaum with the Devin. With that shock absorber repaired, this is a much more competitive proposition. But the bearded Harper shouldn't really have any problems here in a race that includes a collection of 500cc racing cars, as well as 1100s, Formula Junior cars, sports cars, and indeed everything that you can think of, including the French Talbots.